Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Son of a Blitch podcast. I'm your host, George Blitch. And today I had a wonderful chat with Jason Phelps from Phelps Game Calls. You know, Jason has been designing for quite a long time now, well over 10 years, some of the best game calls in the industry. He started out kind of hunting elk and turkey and kind of making those calls. They've gone on to make deer calls. There's some waterfowl. I know I use one of their their owl calls right now. Want to be able to use some elk calls. I just haven't jumped into that yet. He talked about a woodpecker call that they're going to be producing out here in this next year that's going to be able to help kind of locate some turkeys, get some shot gobbles going that way. And they've done mouth calls, pot calls, your traditional calls. I mean, this is one too that they put out last year, the acorn with Clay Newcomb there and designing that for whitetail. It's kind of got a double-ended, call for different grunts and bleats. Man, it is phenomenal. There's so many wonderful things that they put out. Highly suggest you go check out Phelps Game Calls and see which call is going to be right for you. And I hope you enjoy this. We had just had a great chat about Jason's passion, kind of how he views making these calls, what he wants to do, and making sure he's putting out something that he's really proud of. It's going to have your name on it. You want to make sure it's great. And without a doubt, Phelps Game Calls, everything I've ever checked out is well deserved to have his stamp of approval and his name on it. Wonderful, wonderful calls. If you guys got any questions for him, please leave them in the comments below, and I'll make sure that we can try to see if he can address those. And if you got any questions, the contacts on here, look in the description below on how you can follow and get in touch with Jason and the team over there. Once again, thank you all for listening. If you haven't yet, please like, subscribe, share this with all your friends. And without further ado, here is the podcast with Jason Phelps. Enjoy. Hey, Jason, how you doing today, man?
Good. Thanks for having me, George.
Dude, you're more than welcome. You're more than welcome. I'm glad you're here. So, I figure one thing is the best way to start is kind of the genesis of your outdoor experience. Why don't you tell us a little bit about where you grew up, your beginning hunting world and kind of how you got into the outdoors?
Yeah, so family, generational hunters, right? As far back as anybody can remember. My dad grew up in a small town of PL, Washington, where I now reside. My mom grew up in a small town of Rochester, Washington, about 45 minutes from here. Spent the first 7 or 8 years of my life in Rochester, and hunting season was a big deal. You would go out and stay at grandma and grandpa's for, even though we're only 45 minutes away, like you'd stay the whole 3-day weekend or Friday, Saturday, Sunday out here. And it was just a big thing for our family. I can remember like the night before, that feeling of being around the round table is what we called it. All the guys would be scouting different areas and you'd all get back together. Like, what do you see? Well, if somebody didn't see anything, like maybe somebody saw more than, and you would just like, you would, and I loved it as a little kid, just kind of watching, from 2, 3, 4 years old. It was just cool to see grandpa and all my uncles and, the hunting party sit there. And from a very young age, deer hunting, scouting, like it was as much as I could go, or as if there was a seat for me, we were in that seat, out there in the woods. Back then I didn't spot a lot, but you were always going along, and we were out there. And I think I passed my hunter's ed in 4th grade, or I don't know what age that puts you at. But even before then, like, you got grandpa, you'd go out with grandpa and grandma, and I can remember being like 7 years old and grandpa like trying to get me to shoot his deer. I probably shouldn't say this, but grandpa's like, I don't care about my tag. Like he just wants, one of the grandkids to shoot his deer for him. And I can remember like that all trying to happen, and it didn't pan out. But just guys that were loggers, they're out in the woods already. They kind of lived with the animals. It was just something that was very natural, right? They didn't have to talk me into hunting. It was like I wanted my BB gun as soon as it was just very natural, very good woodsman. So as things got older, we started to deer hunt there in 4th grade, and out in the West, for those that don't know, here in Southwest Washington, we have blacktail deer, and then we've got Roosevelt elk, and that was primarily all we hunted. Bear. There's a lot of bear here, but my family wasn't huge into bear hunting. We would go more as a deer and elk scouting, mission. Yeah. But if there were bear there and somebody had a tag, and so that was kind of my upbringing. I was very upset though that I could deer hunt, but I couldn't elk hunt when I first got my license. It was, we're going to buy you a deer tag, and I'm like, well, why are you guys all? It was kind of back to that round table. Like you'd go back down there, everybody's down there elk season, but then I had to sleep in the next day, right? You didn't get the invite on the elk hunt, and like, man, this thing must be real cool, or it was reserved for the grown-ups, and it really kind of frustrated me. So there was always this thing about elk hunting, and I think that's probably why I've elevated it now, because from a very young age, like, this elk hunting is something that you have to achieve or get to a level or have enough responsibility to not get lost while you're out in the middle of the woods. Like,
Yeah.
deer hunting was very truck based for us.
Hmm.
Elk hunting was very, like, wander for 5 hours through the woods is what it looked like to me from a young kid. And know your way and have some navigational skills, and being able to hit a certain pickup spot, and all of that. So
What was that looking like for, like, why they actually had, that rite of passage? What was it about? Was it a certain age? Was it a criteria that they had? Hey, you got to be able to do this. Like, what was that kind of they hesitated bringing you in until that point?
So I think it's the way that we hunt elk. You will glass clear cuts here. So I don't know if your audience knows what clear cuts are. Out here in industrial timberland, we basically cut timber every 40 to 60 years. The majority of their feeds in the clear cut. So on elk hunts, you would check the clear cuts first, but then very quickly, if you've been patterning or scouting elk, you would jump into the timber. Well, I think they didn't want me to have to tag along, or if I wasn't able to, like, it in fourth or fifth grade, as a 10-year-old, or to like find my own way, or them to have to, like, deal with you just sitting in the truck for hours, right? They didn't want to think about that.
Yeah.
So until you were able to basically get pointed in a direction, like hunt down this ridge, go down there, figure it out, come back out, walk out the grade, whatever it may be. So I think it was more of a they didn't want I didn't want it to be like a bother to them,
Yeah.
or they didn't want to have the responsibility of dealing with a young kid while they're all out hunting very hard in the timber, kind of chasing elk down the way that we hunt elk around here.
So when did that transition happen to where you were brought in with them?
So we started to be able to hunt like freshman, sophomore year of high
Yeah.
school, but I was tricked. I didn't realize that you got to hunt opening weekend, but then you had football practice for like the rest of the season, right? So you where they were taking their entire vacations during elk season, and that's where they did the majority of the killing, of elk, was during that week. Like opening weekend, we would kill some, but I'd get to hunt 2 days and then not get to hunt at all. And so we actually, in our area, they were all rifle elk hunters to start with. They started buying, like me and my cousin, muzzleloader tags, because that gave them more time, a different season, and then they didn't have to. They still got to let us elk hunt, but we didn't have to worry about being running around with them when a rifle season hit, which was a good entry. They got to focus on us. We were in more elk because the entire hunting crews were looking for one or two guys, and it really kind of gave us a good entry to elk hunting. But what it really did was open to my eyes to elk still rutting at that time. Rifle hunting around here is a complete silent spot and stalk timber hunt game, where I'm like, these elk make noise and they will come into calls. And you started to watch like the Primo's Truth series back then, and you're like, these guys are calling elk in. These things are still bugling during this muzzleloader season. Like, maybe I should add the ability to call. And that's really kind of what sparked the fire. So I'm actually glad they threw me in a muzzleloader hunt first, because it really exposed me to, the elk rut and the ability to call some of these animals in at a young age.
I mean, I know that you went to college, you got your civil engineering degree, and you kind of had a few different things that you had done as far as, working there with the state. I know you kind of did a bunch of work there with, I guess you did like some bridge inspection. Yep. There was a bunch of things in the kind of transportation world. And then you eventually decided to start making your own calls. And because I guess, that was probably the spark of that idea of, hey, seeing how they can come in, watching those early Primos videos and things. And then you decided at one point in time, you were going to go ahead and throw your hat in the ring and give it a try for yourself. Was it a personal thing first? Like, I want to just have a challenge of being able to make this and do this and see, or was it kind of like a business idea off at the start, or kind of, a combination thereof?
No, I still tell people this day, like, I'm a horrible business guy. I've learned, like, I'm better now, but in the beginning, like, I was the worst business guy, because it was all run on passion, right? So a business guy would sit down like, I need to make this much money, I need to be, in the positive by 2 or 3 years. I was going backwards I was just wanting to get stuff out there, and at first it was just like, can I build one? Like,
Yeah.
I didn't start the business with an intent for anything, but like, can I build one that makes a sound that sounds like an elk? And then I sold a few, gave a few away. The buddy is like, hey, just give these a try. Let me know if they work. I knew they were going to work just from the sound that was coming out of them. Got some pretty good response, and then it really just cascaded from there. No business plan though. Bought a lathe, bought some wood, figured out a way to modify some tone boards that were already in existence. I came from very humble beginnings. I traded away like my first two sets of elk antlers for the lathe and some of the original wood and the tooling just to get started, and that kind of, I would never trade it, but it's like, oh, I wish I could somehow get those horns back, but they've already been turned into calls or dog chews or something by now. But that was kind of and just worked out in the shop, and there's some forums, like back then there was Monster Muleys, like Hunting Washington, my local forums, and just, I was a kid with courage, I guess. Yeah, even though I was mid-20s back then, but I wasn't afraid for somebody to just tell me no. So like the guy that owned Monster Muley is like, hey man, would you care if I gave away a few of these, knowing that people would get to see the post and maybe ask me on the side to buy some? Same with Hunting Washington. I reached out to, back then, I hate the word influencers, or guys on that, that were being paid attention to, like, hey, would you be willing if I sent you a call? Maybe I'll put your logo on it or whatever. And I was just building a lot of these, for free. Started to take off a little bit within the first 3 or 4 years, and got some traction. And I knew in my mind at that point, like, if I'm going to make a real go at it, you can't just build wood body elk calls, because that's what I started with, just external cow calls. You're going to have to like use your engineering skills and start to design some original designs, right? New bugle tubes, diaphragm frame designs, tooling to build the diaphragms in a way that's very consistent. And then it really just cascaded from there. So, a lot of, I'm very transparent. Anybody that's used an elk diaphragm knows that there's a pallet plate that Primos had the patent for forever. We knew by doing some research that the patent was coming up in, I believe, 2016. I started to work in about 2014 on stuff like that. And that was really kind of the big break, was that amp diaphragm really performed better than anything else out there, really consistent. And we were using like some old kids' fat bats. Everybody used to play wiffle ball with those. And so at the time we were just modifying those. It was actually a blessing in disguise when Fat Bat called and said, hey, our mold's no longer good. We're not going to be able to sell these to you anymore. So it forced me to design a bugle tube with a little more functionality than just using a bat. And everything kind of hit, I would say, in 2016. Everything clicked, everything hit. And then that really kind of gave me my I would say legit jump start. So we were 6 or 7 years kind of dabbling and finding good success with the diaphragms and stuff. But when we brought the amp diaphragm and that unleashed bugle tube out for the first time, really skyrocketed the company. And then from there, we dabbled in turkey, started to do some custom deer stuff, and then ran really, really well and grew exponentially for those 4 years into about 2020. Started to work with Meat Eater a little bit, and then towards the end of 2020, kind of they made a pitch to see, we were going to do a turkey line together. That was my proposal. Let's do turkey call line. We'll collab on it, and they were all for it. And as we penciled out numbers and thought what we could do, they're like, "Well, this might look better if we just own the whole thing." I was really reluctant at the beginning, right? It's this is my baby. I've grown it here for 11 years, and it's really close to me. I've employed friends and family, like I did it the way I wanted to, and started to meet with them and got the impression or understanding that we'd be able to continue on. And it ended up being a good decision for me and my wife. Like, sometimes you don't want to give up ownership or control, but we looked at it in a way like, does this take care of you in life and financially? And one thing for me that it's tough, as I mentioned earlier, I had never really thought about the money that was coming from this. It was all driven on passion. The whole business side still hadn't really taken over. Yeah, I was better at accounting. I was better at profits and losses, right? You just have to naturally get
just
better
from the years of doing it. Sure. Yeah.
But I had never really thought, like, what's this thing worth? What's how do you value a company? And all of this stuff came to me, and I'm like, man, I don't even want to put a number to it. I just love this. I love growing it. I love being able to reach people that maybe weren't good elk or turkey callers or deer callers or strategists, and fixing that, or helping them, or giving them a tidbit that helped, and building those educational pieces. I love to hunt, and this was kind of a thing that allowed me to do it a little bit more, right? I had some extra money to go hunt and do this, or go on more trips, or be able to afford to leave work for a couple extra weeks and not get paid, whatever it may be. But yeah, Meat Eater came along, and I'm like, I don't know what this is worth. I don't even know how this process goes. And that was kind of the point where I had to get serious about the business side, and really dig into the books for the last few years. And but yeah, it's been fun. Like and some people don't when your brain works like an engineer, you're always like spinning ideas, like, would that work? Would this work? And so I love being a call designer. And I think in my own mind, like we went very far with the calls now, but like I've got other ideas, like different spots within, as I'm a hunter, like, well, this thing doesn't work exactly like I like it to, and this thing. And so I'm always thinking and wanting to modify or tweak gear to work better for me. And that's just, unfortunately, I can't ever shut it off. So you go to bed like spinning ideas in your head, and that's that. So that's kind of how the calls went through. I mean, there's a lot more to the story, but that's kind of the nuts and bolts of it. And it's been fun and frustrating, but like the very proud of like the Easy Sucker, the amp design, like all these things that were more like we didn't reinvent the wheel, like we invented the wheel in some of those cases, like things that hadn't been used in those sort of ways. And those are like some of those things I like to hang my hat on, like that hadn't been done yet to that point in that way, or that easy. And that was one thing I learned early on, is there's some really good callers, and they can make any call sound good, but what I really focused on is be a good enough designer that you can make these things easy enough to use for anybody, make these things easy enough to use and quality enough. Like I can make very easy to use elk calls, but sometimes they lack in sound quality or volume or one of these things. So that was really what I set forth to do after about 2016. If I'm going to do a design, I want it to, number one, sound as good as anything else, but be very, very easy for the user. And some people have said we've made it too easy on some things, but it's, in the end, I'm just trying to give people the tools to use. And when we brought out the Easy Bugler, for instance, people that hadn't been able to bugle, like to get those emails back, like this literally changed my experience, or this changed the way I hunt, or what I'm confident in doing. Like I say, it may be a little cliche, and people are like, oh, it's easy to say that, but like sometimes that meant more to me than any money that you're collecting from this business is like,
you made a significant difference. You made someone else buy an extra freezer.
Yep. Yeah. And that honestly meant more to me at that point than any money you could receive off of a product. Like I like that was payment enough for anything that I was doing. But building good product, we've tried to bunk the trend as much as possible, to bring as much like USA manufactured, like very important to me. We haven't been able to do it all, which we're very transparent about. But we've put as much of our money back into US built products as possible, which has been tough at times because our price sometimes reflects it. But it's something I'm willing to do, and we just have to try it, see if people are willing to pay for that, because it seems like people are beating their drum anytime you post something like, oh, we'd rather pay more for USA. And then sometimes you bring out a more expensive product and like, that's overpriced, and I'm like, well, I can't win. So you try to balance it. You try to, I take a very, an approach where I step back. Where's everybody else at in the market? Can we do this? It's been fun. I've learned a lot along the way. Still very passionate. So it's awesome, right? If you're passionate about something, nothing really ever fizzles out. So I haven't lost my interest. I'm excited today designing new calls or trying to think of what can come next as I used to be. I just got a lot more on my plate now. So I try to design. My design times are a lot smaller, but I love, like, there are times I wish I could just shut off email, shut off my own podcast, whatever it may be, and just like get into the design trench for a week or two, because I think that's where like the magic comes from. If you don't have time to devote Just like anything in life, right? If you don't have time to devote to a specific product or goal, or let you kind of be able to put all your ideas down on paper and follow them through. Sometimes I think I'm not doing as good a job designing right now because I am so busy and everything else. But it's fun. I enjoy it. I love coming to work every day. My house is about 80 feet from the headquarters here, at least. So it's like my commute. I'm tied to it all the time. I love getting up. I love going to work. And I know it's tough because there's not enough jobs out there, but it's you find something you love to do. You've heard it's so cliche, but everybody says it. Like I haven't worked a day, for the last 5 years working here. It's awesome to get up and just be surrounded by everything you love to do and you want to be involved in. There are times where I remind myself, though, in this business that first and foremost, I love to hunt. I love being a hunter. I love what it does for the freezer and for my family and the pursuit. I'm very open that I also there's a sporting aspect to it. Being an athlete at a certain level through high school, and like I challenge myself and I challenge, but yeah, it wraps up as a whole package. I eat deer and elk 4 or 5 times a week. I like to challenge myself out there in the woods. I love just getting away, the adventure. And so mixing business with like my favorite thing to do was tough. And I oftentimes step back and remind myself as I'm getting mad at a business decision or I'm getting mad at a contract or don't let it like ruin or even impact at all your passion for hunting and what you're doing. And so I've been able to draw a pretty hard line and keep things very separated there, which is really, you see a lot of guys get in here and get burnt out on everything going on. And I've been able to maintain like, man, I'm just getting away to hunt with my family. I'm getting away to hunt with my family and friends, like old school deer and elk camp. And I've been able to maintain a little bit of that, which is very important to me, to not turn a camera on, not turn a mic on during the hunt, and just like, let's just go do this for what it is. And so there's always a balance. You have to produce some content to help sell calls, and sure. We've struck a really good balance and been able to really kind of keep that fire lit for why we do it and how we do it. And it's been a fun ride to this point.
That's great, man. Well, I'm glad you're able to manage that and compartmentalize those things too, because I've definitely seen some folks with burnout and things, or feeling like you're always having to do content. It's great to be able to sometimes just shut it off and spend that time with your family and your friends in the outdoors, and be able to kind of create that balance so that you can go back and be able to go full tilt whenever you need to. I want to rewind back. I mean, there's a few things we're going to get into. I want to talk about your podcast. Definitely the transition, some of the things you got coming up too with Phelps Game Calls, but when you were talking about when, Meat Eater came in and you kind of established that relationships and to where, they kind of bought in to the company there. And what was it like for you in your role? What was the change there too? Because I mean, also, and maybe this is a good time to talk about the podcast, you kind of came in, very soon after that acquisition or merger, however you're calling it, that you then became put on the headset and starting to record and talk about everything and kind of, doing the cutting the distance podcast. But I was kind of curious what your role was like then. Did that allow you more flexibility? Were you able to hone in and just create, new calls and new designs, or did that also bring other responsibilities such as the podcast, or maybe, producing content more than maybe you did before? What did that look like, and how are you creating that balance? How do you feel about that once that has, those two mergers came into play?
Yeah. So, the thing I liked with the legacy move was the main reason we went to Meat Eater. Like, I feel like this brand can get my name and my products to a different level. So that was kind of the main reason we went into it. And so talking with the two individuals at Meat Eater as this process was going on, like, what do your duties look like? Who handles what? And they came to me with this idea that we have a lot of support, right? If you don't like ordering everything, you just want to do design, like, we'll have an operations team that will help you, and we'll have a finance team that will make sure, bills are paid. And so it all sounded very good on paper. We have an accounting team that will pay your bills, collect your bill, all the money. And it sounded good, but in reality, everything for Phelps Game Calls was in between my ears, right? Like, right. I knew it all, and it was not easier. Not saying that it's a bad idea, but it
Yeah.
wasn't as it didn't look as good as it did on paper. I had to be very involved in all of those for a very long time. Um, More so to the point where I'm like, well, now I'm not only just able to do it, I've got to teach somebody who our
Yeah.
vendor is, what these part numbers are, how we order this, what our specs are. And so there was actually a lot more work at the beginning, which kind of caught me off guard. You don't go into it expecting like easy street, but you go in like, wow, my life should be a lot easier. It wasn't. It was more difficult for a while. Um, Went into there, was more involved for at least the first year, probably into the second year. And then the one thing, Meat Eater had a lot of changes from 21 to 24, both administratively. Matter of fact, my company was getting bought from Meat Eater. We had a new CEO that wasn't really involved in it. And so and then shortly thereafter, the VP of finance and the VP of hunt fish left Meat Eater like 6 months in. And that's the only two people I knew. So like revolving chairs and almost unsupervised which I didn't need a lot of supervision. I made good sound business decisions. We were always in the black, like didn't need any help there, but like,
Right.
yeah, we want to put a PO in that's pretty big chunk of money. Like, do I need approval? Can I just sign off on that? And there were some unknowns. So we just recently changed teams again from that. And so there's been some adjustments. I think everything's been for the better, but just like anything, when there's change, I got to learn a new system. I've got to learn a new procedure. So I would say to this day, like I haven't been able to just like settle into a routine yet. There's always changing ideas or changing processes, which is fine. If we're getting better, I'm fine with it. It's just I haven't been able to just always, and I apologize to anybody that begs groceries, but like I've always wanted my job to just be to the point where it's like begging groceries, right? Where it's like I don't have to. My engineering days, like designing a new bridge, it was never the same. You always had to show up and like, man, just you would feel exhausted at the end of the day because you're designing bridges and guardrails for this. Where like towards the end of my engineering career, before I left the state, like I was able to just show up, do my work. I didn't have to think that hard. It was the same stuff over and over. Where now with Meat Eater, like I just haven't. I think once we get into like a steady, year or two rut, and it's the same stuff, just year after year, just new designs. I'll be a lot more comfortable. Just haven't got there yet. But yeah, the transition was nice. I like not having to pay bills. On the other side, like one thing for people might not realize is like you're doing the same work, but you don't get like the profit at the end, which I knew, but you don't really think, it doesn't become a reality until then. Like I'm doing all the same work and the company's cranking along, but like you're already, on paper, it makes a lot of sense. But like one thing that kind of hit me like, oh, don't get paid for that anymore. You don't get any. But yeah, that process was actually pretty smooth. I love working with the Meat Eater team, like very, very talented people. Looking a lot of guys or a lot of people might not know exactly, but, and this is going to sound really pretentious and it's not meant to be. Like before, when I feel like at times, especially when it comes to calls or engineering, or like I'm a pretty smart guy in the room, right? I feel like I'm at a high level, and I went into a lot of these Meat Eater meetings. I'm like, all right, I think I'm maybe the dumbest guy in this room. Maybe from the very educated, very smart, very good at their jobs, which I love being around because it's challenged me to get better. So that's one thing on the Meat Eater team. Like if you got a guy doing social media, he's very, very good at it. If you got somebody editing a film, like they're very, very good at their job. And I love having that support because you're dealing with doers, people that are good at their job, and it's been fun to be able to like leverage, throw ideas off of them and execute, and that's been a real fun time to have that group, that support.
Well, it just seems to be a growing team of just great professionals all around. Anytime there's new acquisition, whether it's, Dave Smith decoys and different, like it's just, there continues to expand. I'm always curious to see what's going to happen each next year. Obviously FHF gear, there's First Light, there's that Meat Eater is just growing and with great people, great companies. And so it's a wonderful thing to see. Moving into that idea of, being in another space within Meat Eater, having the cutting the distance, Remy Warren ran that before the podcast, and then you kind of came in. And I know the first one was quite a fun episode too. Whenever you guys kind of launched that, you guys talked about, Steve and you were on there and you introduced the line one call. let's, before we kind of get too much into the podcast and kind of what that was like, I'd like to just spend a few minutes talking about the line one call and what that was, because I think that was a pretty special call that you guys kind of did and produced, and all the video and everything that's around it as well that people should definitely tune into.
Yeah, yeah. So the line one call was actually a idea that we wanted to do a one-off call, and Steve had the idea. Let's go. I want to kill a turkey on the stump of a tree I cut down and built a call out of. And so we actually floated the idea for a year, like trying to find the right property. Man, I just don't know who or where. And we mentioned it on the podcast and had some people kind of throw some ideas at us, and nothing really penciled out. And then in the meantime, we started hunting with a good buddy, Randy Milligan in Kansas, and he had some good property. And I'm not a tree guy, but there's these fancy apps on your phone that let you like snap pictures of the bark or leaves, and it'll tell me. I'm like, oh, these are hedge trees, or Bois d'Arc or Osage orange or whatever you want to call them. Maybe Osage. I'm probably gonna get tore apart by people that pronounce them right. Oh, these are Osage, and I'm like, well, that's hickory. I can make strikers out of those. Or hey, that's a big black walnut. Randy, and so we got home. I didn't want to like bug him during the hunt, but we pick up the phone and call my buddy Randy. Like, would you ever be willing to? He's like, man. He's like, black walnuts don't produce an acorn. You can cut it. Like they're there. Like if it doesn't produce deer food, like get that thing out of here.
Taking up space. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's like, I just assume have oak trees. Let's get this black walnut out. It'll open up. And so he went out and pre-scouted his property. Went and found us a pretty good black walnut and some good good sections of Osage or Bois d'Arc or whatever you want to call it, hedge.
Yeah.
So we went out there, and me and Steve flew out to his property. Went and actually got some Sawyer lesson. We had some guys there that had the logging equipment, but they cut trees down way different than us back there. Like it's a different. They're cutting it down flush. We cut all of our trees with a stump that's about 2 feet off the ground, and we do, we notch the tree, and we do it different than everything I've seen there. And but they get an extra 2 feet of the best wood, on the tree. So they kind of taught us their way. Steve cut down the black walnut. I cut down the Osage. We then followed the loggers to their mill. And went and got it all slabbed up and canned it up, which and a can is basically just in like manageable sizes to let it dry, and then for us to process it into the calls. We shipped it back to Washington, semi-dried on pallets. Took it to a kiln because we need to get our wood that we're going to use in turkey calls, down into the single digits. We like to be 6 to 8%. Got it dried down in a kiln, and then took it to our manufacturing facility, where we then took those raw blanks, ripped them down into striker sizes, and then got the black walnut ready for the router table, and built those calls. And we did it, so there was a lot of extra that went into that. Normally you just call up your lumber store, like, I want the black walnut. And we tried to just educate on the, what these trees are good for, why they exist, and all the way through the mill. Like, the Osage is hard on blades. It's super hard. It's got like the second highest, thermal unit. It's very dense. Went through all of that, and then documented it, and then went back. And ultimately, I was in the shop and helped build all of those calls. And just something that we had our hands in, more start to finish. And then packaging on a level that turkey calls haven't seen, velvety magneted boxes, all the stuff that we wanted these things to be at a different level. So, cost wise, it didn't pencil out as great. One of the things we did get knocked on a little bit was the price, but by the time you had everything involved, like that wood was a whole lot more expensive than that. And even the box that we put them in, like it cost us more than it cost to build a typical turkey call, and so that was one thing. Like, man, I wish there was a way we could have, and I just calculated it on our normal calculations, but that was the one thing. Like, I wish maybe it was more available to people, because it was a special product. But the price, I still cringe a little bit, and I shouldn't. Like, that's saying that I believe we didn't price it right. Like, we priced it right by business, but I guess I wish it was more accessible to people, or we could have did it on a cheaper, a cheaper way.
But it ran like, I think it's like $300, right? But that's that's like if you go and you buy a handmade piece of art that is, a limited edition, the people who are collecting wonderful things like that. Not even to say something that is usable in the field. I mean, I think it's a collector's item.
Yeah.
It's something that's going to be a legacy item. You can pass that down generational. And this is not it right here, but just to kind of show folks what you're talking about when you're talking about the striker. And here's it, because it was very similar in your design, right? I mean, but obviously different materials. This is one of your other ones here. This the Morganson, or does it say?
Is that teak and
I would say, yeah.
teak? Yeah,
Yep.
teak and green slate. One of my favorite call. Yep.
Dude, I love this. I called up last year looking for one. And that was the one that was suggested to me. Great staff there that always answer questions too. I've got some other calls that I'll pull out in a minute, but just kind of give people an idea. When you have something like that and you have the story around it, I mean, I understand it's a higher priced item than more people. It's not like the layman's going to come through and just buy that. They're going to buy something maybe like this that, is, less, and these are on sale right now too, as well, with your Christmas, special going on. But that's something that I thought it was, very, it's a very limited number. I mean, how many of those did you guys make?
We 1,500, and then we allowed all of our employees to buy them. So you take those out. It was limited, and they did really well. And the call sounds great too. Like it can be set on a shelf, but I don't design anything or intend for anything to ever be set on a shelf. Like I grabbed my line one call, which I have sitting right here at my desk that I'm holding right now. Like it is still the call. It sounds so good. It's a call that I like, and all my new strikers go on this call. Like as I'm testing them, like I want to see what it sounds like on this, and that's just one of those testaments. And I don't know if it was that expensive. Like we put that brass plug on the back with me and Steve's, signatures and the some of the cans at Uniontown, Kansas, like where the call came from. We just wanted it to be a special call, they turned out pretty dang good. They sound pretty good, and it was a cool project to follow that start to finish. And I shouldn't even say this, but like we checked some of our competitor calls, like standard calls in the lineup. Like there's competitors out there with $220, $230 calls that don't have any of this backstory.
Right.
So I don't want to use it for justification, but that was kind of my idea. And like I say, I think you get this thing, and if you want to hunt with it, it's going to hunt awesome. And if you want to keep it on your shelf, then albeit. But yeah, it's a good call, and it was a fun project. And Steve went with line one, and I'm gonna butcher the reason why. If we went back to episode 1 of Cutting the Distance, I would know more about the story. But there's a line of beef where they every year or every when they change up the bull. I don't know, but it's basically like line 1 beef, and then like line 2 beef and line 3 beef. It continues on. So if we ever do this again with a different wood or a different striker or different combinations of material, we can call it the line 2 turkey call. And I don't want to make it too much, but like if some guys might end up collecting them all or getting them all. And so that was kind of our idea, maybe in the future, but we got to find a different wood source, a different project, and then, see what we can. I even wanted to go like the call you were just showing has green slate. Well, it's only available in like one mine in the country. You can only get that in one place. And so it's like, I even want to go to like the mine and go see, because that green slate is very baby. Like it's got to be wrapped in a wet burlap sack all the way until it's manufactured. It's got to be like manufactured very green before it starts to dry. And like, I even want to follow that process, because I think just being a guy that loves the outdoors, like being attached to where this call comes from and what it takes is like, it's just a cool part to know, what all's going into it.
Absolutely. The history of that, and being able to kind of see how things are manufactured, I think it's fascinating. And for people who use some type of tool like this in the woods, it's like to know where it came from and see the history and see you guys and your passion and kind of, A to Z, nuts to soup. It's like, it's really cool to see that process. So I was very fascinated with that. And, just kind of, so in the very first, I think if folks want to hear more about it, definitely tune in. It's episode 1 of the Cutting Distance with you guys, and you and Steve there. But, whenever you were approached with that idea, had you ever seen yourself as wanting to do a podcast? Was this something that because obviously you'd done a lot of interviews, I know kind of, you said like 2016 Western Hunting Expo, you guys kind of, things just took off to another level. And you kind of, I'm sure, have been in part of so many hundreds, I don't even know, thousands at this point in time, interviews.
Yeah.
But being on that other flip side of that table, what was that like for you? And is that something that, Steve approached you with the idea and then you decided, okay, or was there some hesitancy? What was that like for you to get in that driver's seat?
Yeah, so I'd been on a lot of podcasts leading up. It seems like at times I was on one a week, one every other week there for a while when podcasting really kind of blew up 16, 17, 18, whenever that happened. And I was a little concerned of like, I'm maybe a good guest, maybe as long as people are feeding it and keeping it moving. But I was a little nervous, like, can I host this thing? And Steve had recommended it when and it was big shoes to fill, right? Remy and whatever the contract was or whatever he wanted to do. He was leaving and they wanted to keep that there because it was a meat eater owned podcast. And Steve recommended, and I'm like, well, Remy's was very technical. And that's going to be what I'm not the most entertaining. I'm not the most, comedic. I'm not those things, but if I can keep it technical and tactical, which was kind of what I had been doing with my education and the reason I had been on the other podcast, I was going to be okay with it. So I said, as long as we are okay with maybe, and I don't want to use the word dry, but just like very straightforward, I'm going to bring guys that are experts in their field, but really they are good hunters. They've got good tactics. And if I can make, the podcast around that, would that be okay? And they were completely fine with it. Like, let's have a very technical, tactical podcast. And I was able to carry that on. And one thing for me that helps out, which I hate sometimes, is like building treatments. I don't script the whole entire conversation, but I've got a very clear path of how I'm going to get from, the first minute to the 50th minute on a pretty clear direction, which helps me steer and navigate. And sometimes we go a little bit off, but very clear and concise. Whoever my guest is, I know what I'm going to ask them, what they excel at, what they're good at, maybe what they do different. And I've kind of already got everything lined up, and it's been awesome. At first, there was a little frustration. A lot of people were Remy fans, and it's like, oh, Jason, I would not as good, and it's like, it's fine. But just recently, we're about a year and a half into it now. And I've finally seen it turn the corner. I feel like it's a lot of emails coming in. Like, at first we wrote you off and stuck with you, and it's been awesome. So, and that's, once again, more so than maybe when we were selling calls to people. I get more just like, hey man, the information's great. Like, love that episode. That was something I never would have thought to do. And then the nice thing is, and I'm completely transparent, like being an adult onset whitetail hunter, I did all the Western stuff. Like, I get to go at whitetail, like with a very naive intro, and I get to ask a lot of those questions. And it's, I do a lot of research and it's still hunting, so I get a lot of it. But it's cool to go at a different topic as kind of the new guy and not know. And so I go to a lot of biologists, a lot of good whitetail hunters, and just ask my personal questions that I might not know the answers to, or to see if it matches up with like Chris Parrish and Randy Milligan, the guys that I have been whitetail hunting. Like, does this jive with what they've been telling me, and it's not to question them. It's just to see if people have differing opinions. And
sure.
So it's been awesome to like use the podcast as like a route to some very knowledgeable whitetail guys that I have no business interviewing, I feel like, but
well, I kind of understand that same way where, I've had different, wild game chefs, Jesse Griffiths, is one that I interviewed and going to interview again soon. And I'm asking him certain questions as far as like, hey, this is in my freezer. What would you do with it? Or, the Danielle Pruitts of the world, or different people that we're sitting down with and interviewing and getting some of the best to get their perspective. And sometimes it's self-serving to just my buddy and I trying to figure out what it is we want to try next. But really, it's also kind of having that 101 question. Hey, what is the most typical thing that, people are doing wrong? And I mean, I guess that's a good transition to ask too. It's like, what are some of the things when people are buying your calls that you've seen, maybe some mistakes that people make, maybe it's not drying out, their mouth calls, or different things or is there some kind of 101 things that you might give to people, or say, hey, you guys got to make sure you're doing this with your call for it to last longer, maybe chalk on the box call, different things that maybe some people might not recognize as a necessity right off the bat.
Yeah, that's the number one issue that we get, and it's actually pretty low, but storage of your diaphragms. The latex gets wet. Some moisture can get between the tape and the latex or the frame. You've got to let those dry out, especially before they go back into a sealed container. I don't mind them. It's not an issue if they go back to a container after they've sat on your counter for a day. Now, when you sit them on your counter, make sure they're not in front of a window, because heat and direct like UV light is what breaks that latex down. So these calls, especially turkey calls, will last a long, long time if they're kept clean, dry, and in a cool, dark place. So the refrigerator, freezer is even better. Like if you got some space, throw them in there. If not, a drawer is fine, just a dark drawer. Inside your car is very, very tough, especially in the months because you've got extreme heat. If it's on the dash or in a cup holder or something where the sun can hit, it's going to break that call down very, very quickly. But back to the moisture, you will get some nasty molds and mildews if you do not allow that call to breathe and dry out. So number one issue we've got, like, hey, your call mildewed or molded or molded or got mildew on it, or hey, my latex is really wavy, like your call like lax and let go. And you never insult a customer. Right? I learned that early on, but I'm like, can you just send me a picture of it?
Yeah.
And I'm like, that call was stored wet. Like, let it sit and dry, and it'll probably tighten itself back up. So that latex, and so drying it, cleaning it. Some people ask about cleaning it with like mouthwash. I don't like those. Water is fine. Like just run some water, especially on a turkey call, run it through the different layers. Some people use toothpicks. Once again, I would caution anybody that puts toothpicks between the layers, like do not puncture the latex. In certain spots, it really does matter. Certain spots, you might puncture it and get away with it, but make sure you're not going to stab that. Let them dry out, put them away. And turkey calls, elk calls aren't as durable because we're only using a single piece of latex. Those ones will wear a little bit more. So that's even more important. Like make sure they stay out of the sun, make sure they stay out of the, aside from that, the majority of issues we have on open read are people that just aren't protecting the call some people will crease a reed, and they need a replacement mylar, which is very, very cheap. We can do it. But one of the tips or tricks, a lot of times people get it fixed. If you use like a clothes iron on that mylar, you can usually flatten it back out. So you can literally just iron it on a low heat, and it'll get that crease back out and flatten, and it'll like lose its memory to that crease. If not, we can replace it. Like it's a 15-cent, 20-cent piece of mylar. And then just people tinkering. As much as I hate it, like I love people to tinker with their call and think they got some ownership, but like the tinkerers are usually who we get. Like there's no way you could do that without pulling the guts out of the call or the wedge and like messing with it, right? There's no way that could have happened because it's a protected reed. And so
we're
used a
fine with punch there, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And then some of our stuff I designed so that it's very, very tight. Like on a deer call, for instance, like the reed assembly is very tight, and I just want you to move the rubber band around to get your bleats or your buck grunts. Some of these guys like that, you might have trouble pulling out just with they'll put a wrench on it or they'll put a vice grip on it and it tears the tone board up. So it's like we fight that a little bit. On people want to like yank that assembly out when it's, I don't know if that one's tight or not, but that it tinkers. And then other than that, like a lot of our stuff really can't be, it's meant to last forever, last a lifetime, a generational call. A few things where, our diaphragms, unfortunately, are consumable, that we can't build one that lasts forever. But yeah, that's kind of the three biggest things, drying out your calls, storage away from sunlight, and then the tinkers. But like I say, I was a tinker too. I mess with every call I've had before I ever, got it right. So I don't blame them either.
Yeah. Well, those are very important aspects there too. I've definitely seen very early on whenever because I'm not a huge mouth caller, but I went ahead and got, I think it was the very first one you guys did. It's got the Giannis and Steve. I forgot there was one more, the Jake Break, and what's that, Loud and Clear. And there was like a 3-part set, and just to try it out and kind of, I've always been a box caller before, but then I realized a few different things. One is having a few different calls in your arsenal. A couple turkey hunters I've talked to that they're saying it's like, yeah, I bring this one and this one and this one too. Kind of having different sounds out there and trying to see what works, because this one is the one that brought them all in last year. I mean, it was better than anything else. I might, get a shot gobble whenever I was using the box call way at a distance, just kind of to see what was around there. Other folks, if you don't know too, there's owl calls. You guys have a really nice one out there too. What's that one called? It starts with an H, maybe.
The Harrison Pro. We teamed up with the Harrison Hooter or the Harrison Pro.
Hooter,
we teamed up with James Harrison on that one, and he's more owl than most of the owls out there in the woods. So that guy was a great matchup there on that. But yeah, turkey calling's funny because I love locating with the box,
Hmm.
and I usually like to switch to a pot, like minimalize the movement, right? Like if I can
Yeah.
do it with the pot, I'd prefer to do it with the diaphragm. But like last year, we keep all these calls on us. Here in Washington, our Merriams, we finished over half the birds with the box. So I'm sitting there like as quietly and motionless. It's just what they wanted, right? You would
Yeah.
test them with the other calls and they weren't as interested. You go back to the box, they're hammering. And so, yeah, I love diaphragms. I think it's the most useful call, hands free, everything that you need, as motionless as you can
Stealth.
be.
Yeah.
But there are times where the pot is what works, or a pot with a different. Like we've even went to the extent of, well, this pot with this striker is not working, but this pot with that striker is working. Like just the tone difference, and then having a box or all these different things is just having them in your toolbox is great. But yeah, that's why we've got such a wide range of calls.
Yeah. Well, and kind of with all the calls that you've made, and I want to talk about what you got going on in the future too, but I kind of wanted to get back to, kind of nerding out a little bit of the idea of like when you're creating these, what kind of setup do you have to where you're testing the frequencies and you're doing different things to kind of get the science aspect of it too? I mean, sometimes you might hit a call and you're like, oh man, that sounds really good. That sounds natural. But as far as like, are you in a sound booth with any of these recording things and kind of taking down these metrics to figure out, hey, this one produces this volume, this hits this frequency a little bit more? Just kind of curious as far as like the kind of audiologist side of things like that. Like what are you looking that do you have a space for that? Is that something that you just send out? What does that look like?
So we do a few things. We do it on some of our design programs. We can like on the aluminum bugle tubes, the best example. That was the one where we were, it was a patented idea. We went and got the patent, and so we had to have things pretty dialed in. So we used both SolidWorks, a vibration module within SolidWorks, not very cheap, to like this aluminum tube at this wall thickness will resonate at this frequency. So on paper, it should do this. Out in the real world, we use some audio analyzers just outside. We'll do it inside of a room. We'll do it outside. We'll do it from 100 yards away. Make sure that they're fairly consistent. And so we will say like, all right, the aluminum tube hits a frequency that is this compared to our plastic tube hits a frequency that's this. And so we do that as well. I like to go there. There's two ways. Then we also just do comparisons to real animals, and sometimes that comes from YouTube. Sometimes that comes from, and you always have to be a little bit. You have to recognize that sometimes the audio speakers in my computer aren't as good as real life, or my iPhone can't capture stuff as good. But we do a lot of testing on that side, like working on a pileated woodpecker call right now, and something like a woodpecker, when I'm just using it for shot gobbles, it's not as important that I hit like a certain frequency. I'm going more for volume within like a frequency range. Like, all right, as long as it sounds like a woodpecker, I don't care if it's louder. I don't care if it's exactly right. Like, I just want this turkey to gobble, right? And so
Yeah.
it just depends on what project you're undertaking. Where when we went with the owl, we wanted that thing to be identical. So we listen. James knows owls very well. He's won umpteen championships on owl calling. Like the guy knows owls, but then we still wanted to compare it to a lot of real sounds. And then on the Pro, it's the first adjustable owl hooter. So when it's cranked down and it's constricted, it's very, very owly, right? Like a very good sound. But for hunting, we want this thing to be as loud as possible. So we're willing to give up a little bit of back pressure and a little bit of sound quality to crank out and get a gobble. And so we're always checking these things, but then we're also giving ourselves a little bit of leadway where it doesn't have to sound perfect all the time. Deer, a lot of times we'll go to our experts, whether it's Mark or Tony Peterson or Clay. Like you guys are in the
Right.
woods a lot. Like, yeah, these are what this call sounds like, or this was what this mass produced call sounds like. But hey, everything I've watched or heard in the woods, like the doe bleats are a little different than some of those cans. You can, not saying that they don't work. Obviously the Primos can is killed probably more deer than my calls have yet, or maybe ever will. But when every like mature doe I hear bleat doesn't sound like that. Here it's shorter. And so, I was in Mexico with Clay and Steve Coos deer hunting, and
Mm-hmm.
we had some whitetail calls because Steve was dead set on calling in a coos deer, and we're just talking about like what Clay wants. He's like, well, if we could, he's like, I want it to be real soft and subtle, and so we're sitting there tinkering on a call, and I'm like, I know exactly what you want, Clay. Like, I'll go home, cut a different reed, I'll have this dialed for you, and then that's where like the acorn came from. So it's a little bit of a balance, but yeah, as far as like sound analyzing, we do use a lot, but we're not using professional equipment all the time. We're using apps on our phone, apps on our computers, or we'll record a sound and then send it to like a third party. Like, where did this hit? How accurate is it? And so I wouldn't claim that I'm an audio engineer. We're just paying attention to like what we have. And then the other thing that we try to do is usually we're testing calls a year or two ahead of time. And as rudimentary or like old school as it is, like, did this call work in the woods? Like, it's real simple. Like, I don't care what it hits. Like, it couldn't even sound like it, but maybe there's a reason why if you didn't sound exactly like an owl, you'll get more responses. Or if it is louder than a real woodpecker sounds, like, you're going to get more sound, more responses. Or, hey, this pot call is really, really high pitched and shrill, but gosh dang, turkeys were attracted to it because it was different, And so there's like the accuracy side that I'm very concerned about, but then there's like the result side that's why we like to get out and test everything a year ahead of time. And if I need to change soundboards or change a pot dimension, like, we can make that change, but if not, we can leave something there. And that's what I love. I love proofing things on the ground, because not saying that we need to sound exactly like a crow or we need to sound exactly like a bugling bull. Maybe a higher pitch shrill bugle will actually get more responses. That's why I love when that metal tube came out. I felt like the ring and the pitch, like, in my ears was different to me. And in my opinion, I feel like the elk respond to it a little bit better. So at times it's like, well, I think that was a good design because, it may be more high pitch and shrill, but we're getting better responses. So that's kind of the full circle of a design. We do try to be as accurate as we can here, but there are times that we're going to go 20% off of the norm to see if it hunts better than just accuracy.
No, the proof is in the results, right? And it's great that you have a group and a team to kind of bounce things off of, yourself in the woods, and being able to see what works where the best. I think I saw something about, you were talking about doing a moose call, and there's some other ones. You got the woodpecker. Like, what are some things that are coming out, as we're here on the brink of 2024, what are some things that, maybe if you can, talk about some of the things that are in the works, or some of the ideas you may have, or things you want to test out?
Yeah, so the moose tube, we were hand forming all of those, and we realized that from a production standpoint, it might not be good because you can build one a day. Like, we were literally hand laying the one that Steve and Clay used in Alaska. Mm-hmm. Fiberglass. I got a big, heavy, like a 80-pound aluminum mold to build these things. It's just a pain in the neck. So we're looking at a glass infused plastic, which is a little more expensive than normal plastic. So we're looking at ways that we can actually produce these, have good products. I love the idea of a handmade product, but the fiberglass isn't quite as durable for like raking a tree if you wanted to use your moose tube. Mm-hmm. So we've got a moose tube coming. We're working on a woodpecker call that has a little bit of, I can't talk about the other side of it because it's going to be the first. So this call will double as a woodpecker or a something.
Yeah. Something.
We're working on getting that out this year for a new locator. We've got some new elk calls coming out. We teamed up with the three past world champions, and then the other guy works with us on the elk call side. So we went to these guys and like, hey, this is an opportunity to design the exact call that you want to use. So we just try to be a little different and like create these projects that maybe the normal elk hunter won't like them, maybe they will, but these are the three calls that these three world champions all like to use, and then put them in a 3-pack together. We've got something real similar, and I think real similar to the acorn coming, but in a solid acrylic version. So I love the technology we put in the acorn. I love the inhale exhale. If it's cold, you can inhale both sides. You can go back and forth. It really kind of turned out, and we kept it in a small form factor. My concern was to get those two calls to bypass each other. That middle tenon was going to have to get real big, and we were able to like be very, very streamlined and keep that down to a manageable deer call. And a lot of our deer calls, like the beta and alpha, have these big long rubber hoses, which does add to the accuracy of the sound. But back to what we've talked about, that acorn or the alpha hunts really, really well for a small hard-bodied call. So yeah, it might not have that deep guttural tone of some of those grunts, but it's 95% of the way there and it hunts just fine. And it gives you the added ability if you're, hunting pre-rut or during the rut, you can have two different grunts set up. If it's early season, you want to have a bleat and a medium-sized buck grunt, you can do that. And so I love the ability to, without having to pull your call apart, being able to have two different sounds. And when it's cold, you'll be able to inhale either way as well. And the inhale and exhale are different. So it just opens up all of these great options within one call.
No, I love that one, man. I've been taking that out in the field this year. I got it when you guys first released it, used it out in Central Texas, and then recently in South Texas. Definitely stopped quite a few buck when we're just hitting that grunt as they're walking through and, kind of coming in to investigate. Did Clay know that you were going to have it be his signature, one when y'all put that out? He seemed surprised on one of the videos I saw.
Yeah, I think he was surprised on how well it turned out. We had been talking. I wanted to do the two-way call, and he wanted to be involved in it. Mm-hmm. As things started going down the path, he wanted to pick a white oak, which, from a woodworking perspective, I'm like, oh no, Clay, can we find something that looks like white oak? Because white oak is such a pain to finish. It's very porous, so on the call, it's very, very tough to get finished. And so Clay wanted it to be the white oak call, and we came up with the graphics. We worked with our graphic guy. Clay was stoked. And then I'm like, Clay's not a big timer. I'm like, Clay, you mind if I add your signature? He's like, I guess, Jason, so he's like, he's trying to be humble, but I think the call turned out appearance wise, very, very good.
Yeah. It's beautiful.
It's an awesome call. It did give us a little fits. We've had a little issue with some O-rings, like the call shrinking, and I think it might've been some, it's been a pretty low number.
Yep.
But that comes back to, and maybe it's on me, we didn't hunt that call the year before. We just produced it knowing that it had everything that we needed. It was O-ring fit. We thought we were going to be good. We built a lot of duck calls out of wood, and it gave us a little, it's still under 1% of the ones we sold, but we've had a little bit of issues. But yeah, I think the acrylic version of that, we've got a deer call coming out that has a snort wheeze incorporated. So just trying to iron out and finish out that deer call line, which has been a great line for us. Use that meat eater whitetail team to really kind of help promote it for us. We don't have a huge following in the Midwest and the South. So I love, I think it's because whitetail is new to me. I'm addicted. And so I'm very passionate, right now in that whitetail deer call lane. We do a lot of blacktail calling out here as well, but it's definitely, you don't have near the people that are hunting blacktails you do whitetails. So we're really trying to focus in on what whitetails. And then we looked at everything else out there. This is one of those ones I talked earlier, can we demand that price range? But we're literally building a full acrylic call that has twice as much acrylic in it as a duck call, yet we're still selling it for $80, on the beta. And so that's some of the hard debates I have. I know that we're building, and all the other call companies might hate me for this. You're selling the duck call for $150. It has a half of that acrylic in it in the same processes, right? And so that's where I don't have to sit and justify our pricing, but dang, I know we're not making near as much on this deer call, but I want it to be a generational call. That beta call is 100% acrylic. The tone board's machined into the exhaust, just high quality that in a way that others aren't, aside from the custom call builders right now, nobody's building calls to that level. And I want to build it to that level. If it's got my name on it, I want to build it to a certain level. And that's what I've been most excited about. Hey, I know why people haven't did it. It's too expensive, but that's no reason why we shouldn't do it. And I think people, it's funny, you go through, and I shouldn't read the reviews, but you go through and read the reviews of the beta, which is all 5-star and very, very skeptical people when they first bought it. And then it kind of turns a page. I see why this call is this price. So I'm like, all right, whew. I dodged that bullet of another high price call because people get it and they, oh shoot, it's got an integrated tone board into the exhaust, and it had to go from the lathe to the mill and then polished, and you got to put a cork wedge in it like the old school duck calls. So we're trying to do everything at a level that, hey, if I could build this call for me and this is a call I'd like to use, let's offer that as a production option. And what else is coming next? It's a fairly light year on releases. It's more of a balance everything out. And then we got some pretty cool stuff coming for 25, 26. So, so that's where I've got stuff kind of penciled in all the way for the next couple of years. And it's just like making sure I can get through all those ideas and get them proofed. Because it's easy to say this is what I'm going to do. And then it's a different thing to like make that call function how you hope it does.
Yeah, well, and that's I talked to Paul Lewis, FHF Gear, and when I had him on, we were talking about like the idea of like sometimes that production queue is 2 years out. You've designed something, and sometimes you're like, I want to put this out now, but it's like there's a process and everything, and you're gonna get it out there tested. You got to get the video, the different things that come apart with having, being a part of a larger group here and that marketing arm and all the different things that go in to that, and also just the production side of things, finding maybe even the machining, the tooling, the things you got to do to be able to produce this in a repeatable, precision-based format, something that someone's going to be able to pull out and know that this one over here is going to be the same as this one over here. And I know you've talked about how you've gone and taken some things off the line and tested it to make sure that you're getting something that, and there's been times you've, even mentioned too, hey, early on we had something and maybe the latex wasn't the right thickness or whatever, and you're like, this is 95% of the way there, but maybe that ends up going to maybe an organization, a kids thing where they can learn to call from it or something like that, where it's not out on the same market when that's few and far between as you kind of go forward. But those are things that come up and you have to test and you have to check it out, and you might have an idea now that might end up being 2 years down the line when it's produced, because of those types of form and formats of time. So it's and kind of, I know you've kind of started out with doing, the elk and then kind of turkey and some things that maybe hunted more often and kind of moving into the whitetail world. As far as like, some duck calls and stuff, do you see something, more of an advancement of something that you want to do in that world without giving maybe anything away that may be coming down? Is that, there's so many different avenues of calls. Is it like, is there that idea of like, kind of vertical versus, horizontal scaling? Is there something that you see yourself like, one day I want to be able to do this, or do you maybe have some ideas that without giving away,
Yeah.
package?
No, I can talk about that. So we wanted to really, we wanted to maintain the brand and my passions where I love waterfowl hunting. I love shooting them, but I'm not the greatest waterfowl caller. And so we've kind of elected, at least in the immediate future, to kind of have a very limited waterfowl line, something that works, but not go crazy on it, not a full line. So that's kind of where we're at on the waterfowl side. I feel like I need to hunt them for 5 to 10 years and become a very proficient caller. Like I feel like I am on the elk and turkey and deer calling's easy compared to elk and turkey. There's not as much user skill, but I want to become a very good waterfowl caller and know the ins and outs before we really dive deep in. So I feel like we've got a good hunting call, but we're going to kind of leave it at that. Yeah,
right on, man.
Not a huge deep dive into that until we've either got the right players or until we've got the passion and the know-how to do it kind of the way we've did the other lines. Yeah,
well, it sounds like you've teamed up. When you have people who've won so many national competitions and they're known for that, and they're the ones that you're collaborating with and working with, the end results are going to be great. And obviously, you have the skill set and the team to be able to put that together. What does your team look like nowadays? How many folks are there working on a day-to-day at Phelps?
So we got Dirk, who kind of runs our marketing side, and then I've got my wife and Corey kind of run the business and the operation side internally, and then I think we've got 7 call builders in how I have to count real quick. I think 7 call builders show up every day, assembling calls, packaging calls, and that's really, they don't get enough credit because they are an awesome group. I designed these things the first time, kind of give them a 1-hour crash course on how to assemble them, what matters, what you're checking for, and they'll come to me like, hey, this lot of tone boards isn't right because of this, and so we can't just slap things together because you could have 10,000 of somethings on the market that isn't right. And so our crew is awesome, from the people putting the O-rings on to the people polishing barrels, whatever they may be doing. Like our crew is awesome. And so I think we've got about 11 in-house employees, counting myself, and then we've got a few my good buddy Charlie Smith and his company and his employees actually build the majority of our diaphragms. We use a third-party builder for some of our turkey calls, with strict oversight by myself and some of our diaphragm builders. And Chris Parrish, a great one of the greatest turkey callers of all time. Like he has some oversight and QA QC responsibilities on our turkey calls. So it's just teaming up with the right guys, right? And making sure that everything, elk calls, when they still roll through my shop, even though my buddy Charlie's building them and he's responsible for his own QA QC, he's a great elk caller. I still check. So we're like double checking everything. Like I don't want a batch to come through with bad latex or maybe a bad frame. Yeah, I trust you can build this call over and over and over, but I want to make sure that we don't have any slip ups. I think in the 12 years of building diaphragms, I've had like one lot of a certain diaphragm get out that squeak through. But other than that, like I think we've had a almost flawless record of people saying like, man, the call I bought from you back in 2016 when you released this amp is the same exact call I get right now. And that's really what I love. There's no guesswork. There's no quality inconsistencies. It's all just very dialed process.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, precision is a word that comes to mind when I think about your products, and and that repeatability of knowing you're going to be able to get something shipped to you or on the store rack or whatever it is, and you can pick it up, and this is going to be a high quality item. So that's something that tip my hat to you on that. Before we kind of sign off, I had a kind of a question too. We just wrapped up hunting season for the most part. I know there's turkey coming up here too in the spring, but I was kind of curious, what are some big hunts that you went on? What do you have in your freezer? And what is your favorite? I know you said you'd cook a lot of wild game. So like, what is kind of one of your go-to? If someone sits down at a dinner at the Phelps house, and what are you preparing? What are some of the things that are your favorites?
Oh man, I know I'm going to get this wrong. So 23 was awesome. I went on the Coos deer hunt early.
Mm-hmm.
The Coos deer eat amazing, like maybe one of the best eating critters. I ended up with archery elk out of Oregon, a Washington muzzleloader bull, and then a Montana mule deer, and then a Kansas whitetail. So I've got a pretty good selection. They all eat great. Everybody's like, oh, the Montana mule deer in the rut, but man, I tell you what, I haven't got a bad one yet, and it's good. I'm gonna probably really disappoint you with this answer because I grew up eating this way. Like we don't do a lot of roasts on deer elk. It just everything gets turned into steak, like cleaned up. And so, man, our go-to is just like pan fried. I'm trying to eat healthier, like no fly. So it's like just straight up salt, pepper, a little bit of garlic powder, like pan fried elk steak, maybe a little bit of sweet potatoes on the side. I eat very, very boring because I'm a big guy, and so I'm trying to stay in this like 230 range and not go back the other way. So it's like pan fried, no breading, elk steak, deer steak. We eat a lot of burger, whether we turn it into like taco, spaghetti, meat, whatever it may be. But we try. My other favorite way is if we keep it, or like this year from my Oregon Bowl, I kept all my back straps, my tenderloins, and some of the roasts intact. Like I absolutely love like marinating in like and people are going to laugh at it, but it's just kind of our old standard brine, like a little bit of Coca-Cola, some tender quick, and some black pepper and garlic powder, and then just putting it on the Green Mountain Grill or the Traeger or the smoker, and letting it go to medium rare. And like my kids don't believe me that it's not beef and it's wild game, and that's my favorite way. It's just a little more time intensive. That's more of a weekend meal, but during the week when we're running and going everywhere my kids got sports every night of the week, and every weekend it's usually like as fast as I can like cook some steaks or get some burger thrown into the pan, like we're in and out real quick.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And speaking of the kids, I know you've coached some sports too with your kiddos. Are you still able to find that time to do that, or are they moving up in that level?
I'm 2 days in to coaching junior high now. Because I've coached every sport my kids have ever played, whether it's baseball, basketball, football. Wrestling I can't do. My boy wrestles now, which I love. I love the sport, and I love that I don't know anything about it because I don't have to coach it that way. But basketball, baseball, football, like I've coached everything they've ever did. And I don't like saying this, but it forces me to like spend that extra time. Like I'm very involved with my kids all the time, but it makes sure that time's with them. Yeah, I'm the coach, and my kids are old enough now where I'm not the nice coach anymore. I'm not a jerk, but I'm no longer like, oh, I want you to pay attention. I want you to get after it. I'll coach our junior high basketball team. My boy's an 8th grader, so I'll be done this year. I don't know if the opportunity will be there to like jump over and help my daughter like through her last little bit of junior high, but I'm hoping with my crazy work schedule and my inability to high school's a lot longer season. I feel like I have to be at every practice, of course, every game. Like it may just interrupt hunting schedule about middle
Hmm.
of November. So I hope I don't have to do high school, but if I need to, or if nobody's there, we'll see. But yeah, grow up with a very competitive family. Dads and uncles were all very involved. They coached us all the way through. And yeah, so it's, right now it's basketball and baseball. My boy doesn't play football anymore, which thank God, because it's in the fall, and I don't know anything about volleyball, but baseball and basketball, I usually jump in and coach everything they do.
Yeah, fall seasons can be tough for hunters when their kids get involved and vice versa. I was in competitive soccer, playing around the country all over, and fall was the time. And then I realized, like, after I'd kind of gotten to college and finally hung up the soccer cleats as far as competitive play, I was like, man, there's a lot more time for hunting now.
Yep, yep.
So I
Yeah,
hear
no,
you.
it's a blast. I love it. And I remember I wanted to hunt and not play football when I
Hmm.
was younger in high school. And my dad, like, hey, you can hunt the rest of your life. And so I kind of use that same thing on, like,
Yeah,
I can hunt the rest of my life. I need to get, spend as much time with my kids
sure.
and get them through sports. And I'm not going to lie, I do miss some volleyball games and I miss some wrestling matches due to hunting. But I'm there if I'm home and can make it work. I'm here as much as possible. And
Sure.
yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I love the I love being around all the kids. I've kind of got that perfect relationship with all my players. Like we can goof around and we can give each other crap, but yet they know when like too far is too far. And so it's like I've built this, and I'm excited to see what this group of boys, somewhere down the road does, because it's been fun, like all the way from kindergarten to here, and it's just something I love to do. And it when you've got that competitive spirit, like I've got it in business, I've got it in everything I do. It's nice to, even though you can't compete anymore, you're like, you got it from a coach's perspective. So I love to just go out and get the best out of kids and compete. And I probably have too much fun competing, but it's all good.
No, man, it's great. It's great. It helps make the kids, it helps shape them in such a way, and having someone who's positive and who's been there and, encouraging them and being someone who they can look up to in another setting too, in your professional avenue as well. And kind of turning into that, I was kind of going to ask you as well, what is it that you want your legacy to be? And I know you're not an old man sitting on the porch and in your last few rocks on a rocking chair, but so I know it's kind of a weird kind of question is it in some ways, but I think you've kind of made some substantial marks and with your game calls with obviously with some of the kids and things too, and your community and things like that as well. So maybe in a personal and a professional setting, what is some of the things that you kind of view and when you're thinking about your legacy?
Yeah, I had a lot of time to think about this when we sold the company. Like I've had this conversation many times, and from a career or a game call perspective, I want to be known as a company, a very high quality game call company, that I could almost go to our Phelps Game Calls mission statement, because that was the legacy I wanted to leave, was like a call company by hunters that cut no corners, basically, like always high end, which then ties into like the content, which I think is really how people know me or get to see me. Or from, I want to be known as, and this is weird, but it's important to me, like a guy that never screwed over anybody in business, a guy that's always been very honest in business, very transparent. And then once you get through like that, like I want to be an educator, like somebody that somebody's gained a piece of knowledge from, or that 20 or 30 years down the road, like, man, I remember when Jason was doing this education, or he brought on this project, or hey, he went over, like Jason's a guy that will go and speak at the Fish and Wildlife Commission and made a difference aside from just collecting money. He was the guy that went over with the biologists and captured calves for 2 or 3 days. Yeah, I get the flexibility in my schedule to maybe do that sometimes where maybe other people don't, but I want to be more than just a guy that made money off of a hunting industry or a group of hunters. I want to help with conservation. I want to help with studies. I want to help make people better hunters. I want to make, I want to be the guy where, and I'll never take credit. I don't hate it. I always turn it back, like, hey, without Phelps Game Calls, like I would have done this, or without your help, I never would have killed this bull. I'm like, no, I just gave you the little piece you needed. Everything else you had to do. I wasn't there with you. I wasn't, like, I want all of those things. I want to be positive. I want to leave a good mark on hunting, and I want to make hunting better than like leave it off better than where I got it. Now we got a lot of stuff working against us. I'm not going to lie. That's going to be very tough to be able to say that. But I also battle a lot of what we do and maybe some of the impact and stuff we put on public land. Like I'm not, I would be lying to say that it doesn't, I have some internal battles. Like, should I even have a videoed hunt in this area because of the pressure it already receives? Or, it's like, I struggle with that. And so I'm trying to balance all of this from um, a business side versus like what's right for the animals or what's right for the area or the people that have hunted that before. And so just trying to be very, very, I don't know. I don't know what word encompasses that all. Just very respectful to hunting and what it means versus, I hate to use the word, but you have to use it, like the commercialization of some of what we've did, and strike a good balance. And so I like to respect that. I like to always think about that. And that's really kind of where I want to be. Yeah, people throw the word influence around. I hate it, but I would love to be able to help people educate, become better hunters, maybe, find different ways to do stuff. And from a career side, from a personal side, like, man, I would love for people to say, like, family man, like very good to his family, like, and helped very involved in the community, which I am. And so that's my biggest fear is like, it's weird to think about, like, when you die, like, who's all showing up at your funeral? Like, you want that place you want to have an impact. You want to be the guy that had touched a lot of lives and been in a lot of people's lives and all for the good. So from a personal standpoint, like that's my number, what's high on the list is being a good family guy, good dad, good husband to my wife. Mm-hmm. And then, a good community member, for everybody.
Great answer, man. Those are all very important things. And I like your idea of like the awareness of those kinds of, conflicting things as far as, when that encroachment of like, okay, the public lands and like maybe putting too much attention on this, but I think you bring it out in a balance and you're in the right place, your heart and your mind is in the right spot. And I think those things all balance out, looking at all the conservational, approaches and the things where even that, knowing that there's a internal confliction, some people don't even think about those things. They just take, but what can we leave behind for those future generations, for our kids, grandkids, and 7, generations down the line, and wanting to improve it. And like you said, there are some things working against this. So it is important.
Yeah, I mean, I've ruined some of my own hunting spots with some of our videos, and like, all right, now if I did that to myself, like I could do that to other people, and it's just that realization where it's like, wait, we maybe need to rethink our approach, or do we really need to film this, or anything that's recognizable. So it's tough, and I battle with it all the time. I ask myself all the time, like, why are you taking this picture? And maybe I shouldn't. Like, why are you building this content? Like, what's the purpose? Does it have a real meaning, or is it to get this many likes and this many comments? And so I'm very, very aware, and maybe I shouldn't be, but the more I move through and get spots ruined, or like, I was on a deer hunt with my family this year in Montana. Nobody will ever see the pictures of it or anything because I met too many people in the area and so all it takes is me to post a picture, that guy to comment that, like, hey, I seen you when we were there. Somebody looks up where he's from, and it's like, well, that's not fair to the people that are around there that I seen hunting. And so it's a weird thing that I'm trying to navigate right now. And but yeah, legacy wise, like, but I've got to produce that educational content. Like, if I can show somebody how I glass for mule deer, or how I approach like a morning in the elk woods when I've got something located, how I'm going to approach so it's that balance of liking to see people find their own success through education, but then not overdoing it or doing it in a respectful way.
Yeah, no, it's a balance, man. Totally. I hear you. And it's new for us in the social media. Before, like, now anyone can find out where you are very easily. It's definitely a different world than it was, for us growing up. So no, there's some challenges there. As far as, people wanting to follow your journey and maybe see some of these videos and things too. I know you got a YouTube, you got your website, and you got your own personal, pages you can follow. If you can just go ahead and lay out the socials and your websites, people can go ahead and follow.
Yeah, so Instagram, we're on there at Phelps Game Calls. They talked me into starting my own personal one, so it's at Jason Glenn Phelps is my personal Instagram. We've got Facebook, like my personal Facebook. I'm pretty I'm on. We've got the Phelps Game Calls Facebook page. We were on TikTok. We're not real active because everything always gets flagged for policy violations. You can't have anything in there. So we're on TikTok. We're not super active. And then, our YouTube channels at the Phelps Game Calls YouTube channel. And then a lot of our stuff, like me and Steve's elk hunt, me and Steve's Idaho mule deer hunt is on the Meat Eater YouTube channel as well. So we're kind of all over, super easy to get access to. Our email, I'll give you cutting the distance. Like if you ever have any questions or want somebody to ask questions for our podcast, would be ctd@phelpsgamecalls.com. I'm gonna reserve my personal email
that's fair.
Just so I don't get overloaded there. But the CTD one gets filtered a little differently. So easy to get a hold of. We try to, me and Dirk are as active on our own accounts as possible. We're usually the ones answering them. So and the nice thing about messaging and stuff is just we can get to them when we can, and we usually address you. So it's easier sometimes to get messages than or emails. So
Sure.
Super available.
That's great, man. No, it's very important. Well, thank you so much for coming out and kind of sharing part of your journey. And I love your calls, man. I'm excited to see all the things you got coming out in the years to come, and all the best with that. And man, thanks again. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it, George. And we'll have to stay in touch and maybe do it again. Maybe I'll have you on our podcast.
Hey, I'd love that. And next time you want to come out and hunt in Texas, man, I know you got that whitetail bug. So come on out to one of the ranches I'm running, and you can come and check it out here.
Will do. Take care.
All right, you too.
Yeah, bye.